My name is Eleanor Vance, and I am 26 years old. They say this is the age for taking control of your life, but for me, the past is the force that still holds the real power. A lurking specter waiting for a moment of weakness. My childhood is not a memory, it is a sentence. My home did not have fairy tales, only long, silent hallways. My greatest terror was my stepfather. In front of everyone, he was a perfect role model. But when the doors closed, he was a monster. I tried to speak up once. I sat down and told my mother the entire truth. I did not need her to believe me. I just needed her to protect me. Instead, she looked at me with cold eyes and said, "You are imagining things. Do not disrupt this family." In that exact moment, I knew I was completely alone. My mother had chosen him. She chose a false peace over my safety. That was her choice, and I had a choice of my own. At 18, I graduated from high school. The very next day, I packed my things into a single suitcase and left London. I did not say goodbye. I just left. I chose Edinburgh, a city far enough away to start over. It was a liberation. For the first time in years, I could breathe without fear. But freedom always has a price. I had to build everything myself, to face the nightmares alone. I learned to survive on my own. That, it turned out, was the best preparation for what was to come. I once thought that leaving was the end of it. I was wrong. Distance cannot stop greed. Family never let me go. The phone calls still came, regularly. They never asked how I was. They demanded. They used family ties and the debt of raising me to ask for money. Sometimes for my brother's business ventures, other times to repair the house. Every time I refused, they called me an ungrateful child. They had taken my childhood. Now, they wanted my financial future. I had become their personal cash machine. My life continued this way. By day, I was Eleanor Vance, an art conservator. By night, I was drained by the toxicity of the very people I once called family. In the midst of those weary days, I kept one small ritual. Every Friday afternoon, I bought a lottery ticket. I did not truly believe in luck, but it was a symbolic act to hold on to a sliver of hope. And then, one Friday evening, the impossible happened. I sat in my apartment, checking the numbers on my phone. The first number matched, then the second, then the third. My heart began to pound. By the sixth number, I realized that all 6 numbers on my ticket perfectly matched the results. $47 million. I stared at the number, but there was no joy. Instead, a chill ran down my spine. The feeling was terrifyingly familiar, like when I was a child, hiding in the closet, hearing my stepfather's footsteps approaching. I knew this money was not a blessing. It was a curse, a piece of bait that would attract the flock of vultures I called family. The demanding calls would no longer be a trickle. They would become a flood. They would not leave me in peace. No, I would not let that happen. That very night, a decision formed. I would keep this a secret. No one could know, and this lottery ticket would become my weapon. So, the next morning, I did not go to the museum. I spent the entire day researching law firms and chose a name. Mr. Alistair Finch, an older lawyer known for his discretion. Mr. Finch's office was on a prestigious street. I walked in, my hands clutching the bag that held the ticket. There, I briefly explained my situation, emphasizing only a complicated family and the need for absolute confidentiality. Mr. Finch listened with professional calm. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice steady, "you have acted very wisely in coming here first." He then outlined a detailed plan, establishing an anonymous trust to protect the assets. All transactions would be secure. He also warned me about the risks. "From now on, caution is your #1 rule," he stressed. Leaving Mr. Finch's office, my fear had been replaced by a different feeling. Power. For the first time, I was not the victim. I was the one controlling the chessboard. That evening, a plan began to take shape. I had spent my life running, but now it was time to fight back. I would not hide anymore. I would set a trap. A final test to unmask their true faces, to see if they had any humanity left before I slammed the door on the past for good. This plan needed to be precise, just like restoring a painting. I would use a small lie to expose a great truth. I started with a call to my mother. I presented my prepared story. I had lost my job and needed to borrow $5,000. I tried to make my voice sound desperate. The other end of the line was silent for a moment. Then my mother's voice came through, cold and distant. "Eleanor, you are 34 years old. It is time you took responsibility for your own life." She hung up. Not one word of comfort, only rejection. Next was my stepfather. I sent a text, not wanting to hear his voice, but he called back immediately. I answered to the sound of a mocking laugh. "I told you so," he said. "How long could that ridiculous job last? Do not call here looking for a handout." I ended the call. A cold fury rose within me. Finally, there was my brother, Mark. I had once hoped he would be different, so I sent him a longer message, explaining the situation. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. A short, blunt reply. "I'm having my own problems. Stop bothering me." The last flicker of hope died. The results were not unexpected, but the reality still chilled me to the bone. To them, I was nothing more than a burden. I sat motionless in my room, everything exactly as I had predicted. And then, the phone rang again. An old landline number. It was my grandmother. Her voice on the other end was warm and worried. "Eleanor, I just heard your mother talking. Are you all right?" For the first time all day, I felt my armor crack. I did not complain. I simply recounted to her each person's reaction. She listened in silence. Then she spoke, her voice resolute. "Listen to me. I do not have much in savings, but I still have your grandfather's watch. I will sell it. Objects can be replaced, but a clear conscience cannot." Her words were the only genuine thing I had heard all day. In the middle of a rotten family, there was still one person. She was the only one who knew the truth about my past and had always stood by my side. In that instant, I knew what I had to do. I would not let her sell her keepsake. Instead, I would go to her to begin a new plan. The next morning, I took the earliest train to London, telling only her I was coming. I went straight to her small apartment, a quiet place, a world away from my mother's house. The moment the door opened, she pulled me into a hug, a warm embrace. "Come in, child," she said. "You look so tired." We sat in her living room. I decided I could not deceive her any longer. I looked her directly in the eye and told her the whole truth, about the lottery ticket, about the fortune, and about the test I had staged. I braced myself for a scolding, but she just listened in silence. When I finished, she was not angry, only letting out a heavy sigh before reaching for my hand and squeezing it gently. "I am not angry with you, Eleanor," she said, her voice filled with a deep sadness. "I am only sad that my granddaughter had to go to such lengths just to find a little bit of honesty." Then, she stood up and walked to the window. "This family has been broken for a long time, Eleanor. Not just since your stepfather arrived. It was broken long before that." She told me things I had never known, about my mother's selfishness and my brother's weakness. "They are used to living off others," she said. "They are like mistletoe, always looking for a strong tree to cling to. And now, they have seen you." She turned back, her gaze serious. "Now you are too big of a tree. They will not just cling to it, they will try to chop it down. Their greed has no bottom." She gripped my hand tighter. "Listen to me, Eleanor. With these people, you must be ruthless. Do not trust anyone. Do not trust your mother's tears, your brother's promises, and absolutely never turn your back on your stepfather." Her words were not advice, they were a warning. Leaving her house, my mind was no longer heavy but clear. My drama was not over. It had only just begun. This was no longer a test, it was a war. Returning to Edinburgh, my grandmother's warning became my guide. I had a solid legal wall in place, but I knew it was not enough. Hungry wolves do not give up easily. They would look for any crack, and I had to be one step ahead of them. And then, it happened. One late afternoon at the museum, my phone buzzed. An email from Mr. Setter, Finch, the subject line in all caps. Urgent matter. Vance Trust. Contact immediately. I went into my office and called him back at once. Mr. Finch's voice was tense. Miss Vance, we finally reached you. We have been trying to call for 2 days, but could not get through. There is a serious problem with your trust, he explained briefly. The security system had detected unusual withdrawal requests for hundreds of thousands of dollars through a third-party law firm with seemingly valid authorization documents. I did not sign any documents, I said flatly. That is precisely the problem, Mr. Finch replied, and our calls to your number were being redirected to an automated voicemail stating you were away on business. My mind instantly connected the dots. The automated voicemail. The trip home. My stepfather fixing my phone. He had made his move. Mr. Finch, I asked, my voice perfectly calm. What is the name of the authorized person? There was a second of silence on the line. Then Mr. Finch answered, his voice clear. The authorized party is a Mr. Michael Davies. My stepfather's name. I did not scream. I did not cry. A cold stillness washed over me. I was not surprised. I was validated in my fury. My grandmother's warning had come true. The game had begun. My anger was not hot. It was cold. He had invaded my life, controlled my communications, and brazenly stolen my money. He had crossed every line. Miss Vance, are you still there? Mr. Finch's voice came through the phone. I am here, I replied, my voice hard. Mr. Finch, we need to act now. Freeze all transactions. Gather every one of those forged documents. I need them. Of course, Miss Vance. And one more thing, I added. Find me the best cybersecurity expert you know. Hanging up, I stared out into the night. He had made a fatal mistake. He had underestimated me. This time, I would not run. I would hunt. For the next few days, I did not go to the museum. My world shrank to my apartment, my computer, and a constant stream of calls with Mr. Finch and Ben, the cybersecurity expert. Ben confirmed what I already knew. Spyware had been installed on my phone, cloning everything. It meant my stepfather had known about my lottery win from the very beginning. He had not stumbled upon it. He had been hunting for it. The rage gave me a strange focus. I was no longer afraid. I became a detective. I had Ben retrieve all the stolen data and trace its origins. That is when the final curtain was pulled back. Ben's data confirmed it. My stepfather was not the only one. First came the call logs and text messages between him and my brother Mark. Mark was not just silent. He was an informant, feeding him information about my weaknesses. He had sold me out. Next were the bank statements. A portion of the withdrawn money had been transferred directly into my mother's account. My mother, the woman who told me to take responsibility for my own life, had been quietly benefiting from the theft. This was not just my stepfather's plan. This was a scheme orchestrated by my entire family. The recovered text messages proved everything. They discussed their plan to bleed me dry. They laughed at my naivete. They called me their walking goldmine. And then, one final truth emerged, connecting everything. My stepfather's actions all those years ago were not just perversion. They were a test to control me from childhood, a way for my mother to gauge whether I was a compliant child. The past and present merged into one. They had always seen me as an asset. My mother's silence back then and her complicity now were born from the same source. I sat in the dark, staring at the computer screen. There were no more tears, no more pain, just a cold, empty void and a burning fire of hatred. They had made a mistake. They thought I was still that same weak child from years ago, but they had awakened someone else inside me, someone who had lost everything, and therefore had nothing left to fear. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Finch. "Sir," I said, my voice terrifyingly calm, "I need you to prepare everything. I want to organize a family meeting. It is time to bring down the curtain." I chose the house in London, my former prison, as the stage. I sent out formal emails requesting an urgent family meeting. They would come, of course, assuming their gold mine was ready to be exploited. I arrived early and sat alone in the living room. This place had once been filled with my fear, but today I felt only a cold calm. I was not the prey, I was the trapper. They arrived one by one. My stepfather with a look of self-satisfaction. My mother with a mask of false concern. My brother Mark, fidgeting nervously. I did not invite my grandmother. Her integrity did not belong in this place. They all sat down facing me. The air was silent. My mother was the first to break it, her voice sweet. "Eleanor, darling, what is wrong?" I did not answer. I simply placed a tablet on the table and pressed a button. The screen lit up, displaying the transaction statements from my trust, the enormous figures, and the familiar names. The color drained from their faces. What is this?" my stepfather stammered. I swiped to the next screen. The forged power of attorney, my signature magnified. "This signature," I said. My voice even. "Does it look familiar?" Silence descended. My mother began to breathe heavily. "Perhaps," I continued, "you will recognize these more." And then I delivered the final blow. The recovered text messages appeared, the conversations between the three of them. The naive girl bought it. "Take it slow. Do not let her get suspicious. When do we make the next move?" The mocking words, the plans to drain my funds, all of it laid bare. Their masks shattered. And then, all hell broke loose. "This is your fault," my mother screamed, pointing at my stepfather. "You were too greedy." "Mine?" he roared back. "Were you not the one pushing me? And you, Mark?" My mother turned on my brother. "You sold out your own sister." "For who?" Mark yelled back. "Was it not you two who dragged me into this?" They screamed at each other, blaming, accusing. The room devolved into a chaotic mess of hatred. They were no longer an alliance, just three selfish individuals trying to save themselves. I sat there, watching silently. I felt no satisfaction, only a profound emptiness. This was my family, tearing itself apart over money. The play had reached its climax, but this was not yet the final scene. As their screaming reached a crescendo, another sound cut through the chaos from outside. The wail of a police siren. It grew louder, more insistent, right outside the house. All three of them froze, their faces pale. They looked at each other, then turned in unison to look at me, their eyes filled with disbelief. At that moment, the front door burst open. Two uniformed police officers entered, along with Detective Grayson, with whom I had been working all week. Absolute silence fell over the room. I slowly stood up. All eyes were on me, but I was no longer the small, frightened Eleanor. Now, I was the one delivering the verdict. I looked at each of them in turn. My stepfather, my mother, and my brother. "I gave you so many chances," I began, my voice calm and cold. "When I was a child, I spoke out and you silenced me. When I became an adult, you bled me dry. Even in my final test, you still refused me." I paused, looking directly into my mother's eyes. I once thought this was the fault of one person, but when I discovered this was an organized plot by the entire family, I emphasized each word. I knew I could not be silent any longer. I turned to Detective Grayson and nodded. "I have reported the entire matter. This scheme was not just about financial fraud. It was built on decades of manipulation and betrayal, aimed at someone they thought would never fight back." Detective Grayson gave the signal. The two officers moved forward. My mother collapsed, wailing, "Eleanor, no! I am your mother." My stepfather backed away, stammering. An officer approached, read him his rights, and snapped silver handcuffs onto his wrists. Next was my mother. She wept and begged, but the second officer decisively pulled her to her feet and cuffed her. Finally, it was my brother Mark. He stood frozen, his face ashen. He stared at me, his eyes filled with horror, as if he could not believe I could do this. He probably thought that, no matter what, we were still family. But I just looked back at him with cold detachment. He had known the truth about the past. He had known what kind of man my stepfather was, and he still chose their side. That choice had a price. As the police led him away, He never took his eyes off me, but in my gaze, there was no longer hurt, only resolve. They screamed and blamed each other all the way to the patrol car, but it was too late. The curtain had fallen. I stood alone in the empty room, listening to the sound of the police sirens fading into the distance. A deep silence settled over me. For the first time in my life, I felt at peace. A peace that came from breaking the chains. The months that followed were a series of legal proceedings. I was no longer a spectator. I was the primary witness, alongside Mr. Finch. I provided all the evidence. Every time I had to retell the story, old wounds ached, but it was a necessary pain. The case became public. The press called it the millionaire family tragedy. I did not care. I built a wall to protect my privacy. I did not attend the trial. I had no desire to see their pathetic state. I only heard the results through my lawyer. They faced the inevitable consequences. My stepfather received the longest sentence. My mother and brother received their own proportionate sentences. Through the legal process, all the stolen assets were recovered. The numbers in my bank account returned to what they were, but I was changed forever. When everything settled, I returned to Edinburgh. The silence in my apartment was no longer loneliness. It was serenity. The burden of lies and fear had been lifted. The ghosts of the past were just truths brought to light, parts of a story that now had an ending. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor. This process was not about revenge. It was a purification. I had to burn down the toxic forest of my memories. And now, as the ashes settled, I was ready to begin a new chapter. The first thing I did was return to London and bring my grandmother to live with me in Edinburgh. My apartment, once a solitary place, was now filled with the warmth of family. She was the last piece of the concept of family that I held on to. We lived a quiet life. She never brought up the past, never asked about the money. She was simply there, providing a peace that no fortune could ever buy. The $47 million still sat in the trust. I had once seen it as a curse, then as a weapon. But now, I looked at it differently. It was the result of a painful journey, and it had to have a greater meaning. I made my decision. With Mr. Finch, I used the majority of the assets to establish a charitable foundation, the Beacon of Hope Foundation. Its mission was clear: to help victims of domestic abuse and violence, people who had spoken out but were not heard. The new work consumed me. I was no longer preserving lifeless objects. Now I was helping to mend fractured souls. With every life we helped, my own wounds healed a little more. My pain had been transformed into a purpose. I learned a lesson. Family is not always about blood. Sometimes, the people you share blood with are the ones who will stab you in the back. True family are the people who believe in you and never try to use you. My family now is my grandmother, my colleagues, and the strangers I am trying to help. Looking back on it all, I realize I did not find peace from winning the lottery. That luck was merely a catalyst, a torch that illuminated the darkest corners. True peace came from daring to face the truth, from breaking the chains of deceit and fear. It came from choosing the path of justice. Finally, I had found my salvation, not in the numbers in a bank account, but in the tranquility of my own soul, in my grandmother's smile each morning, and in the hopeful eyes of those I had the chance to help. I had written a new ending for my own story, an ending with no ghosts, only light.